Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. Let's talk about the magisterium, the teaching authority of Jesus Christ, as a sure and safe guide for our troubled times. There's a lot of controversies going on in the church, a lot of questions on matters of faith and morals, and also a lot of pushback on some of the things that the church has taught recently. And some people are concerned that we're being led astray, and so they're looking for guidance. They're looking for some kind of norm, something that is safe, that will help guide them through theological controversies. And sometimes they uh, go and resort to some popular cardinal or bishop or an alleged prophecy or something. But what is conspicuous is in pretty much each instance where they don't go for a sure guide is the magisterium, the teaching authority of Jesus Christ on earth in the Catholic Church. They'll go pretty much anywhere else except the one place that Christ gave us. And again, that is the magisterium as a sure and safe guide for theological controversies and questions. And that's what I want to briefly demonstrate today. And I want to appeal to Pope Leo the 13th, who explicitly taught this. And then I want to look at a few other things that some popes have taught. And if you are a Catholic, I think you'll appreciate it. Now, if you're not a Catholic, obviously, there's other work that would need to be done before I would ever appeal to a pope. Obviously, appealing to a pope won't convince you. This is more an appeal for people who are already Catholics and already accept the authority of the Pope. I want to show you what one of them said, specifically, again, Pope Leo the 13th. And this is in a work that he did, Sapientiae Christianae, on Christian wisdom, I believe, is the encyclical of Pope Leo the 13th on Christians as citizens. Um, now, and you can see it takes its name here from Christian wisdom. If you take a look at paragraph 24, it has a section here that is just incredibly helpful. And so this is kind of the section that I want to hone in on. Let's take a look at it. He says, in defining the limits of the obedience owed to the pastors of souls, but most of all to the authority of the Pope, it must not be supposed that it is only to be yielded in relation to dogmas of which the obstinate denial cannot be disjoined from the crime of heresy. What we often hear from people even today is, hey, well, if it's not infallible, if it's not a dogma, I don't have to believe it. So unless it's something infallible, I could just choose to ignore it, and this is not something that my conscience is bound to give assent to. And that's just simply not true. That has never been true. Pope Pius IX refuted that. So did Leo the 13th here. And he wants to say it's not just instances of dogma where we must obey our shepherds and assent to their teaching, specifically the Pope. Um, if you look here, it continues, nay, further, it is not enough sincerely and firmly to assent to doctrines which, though not defined by any solemn pronouncement of the Church, are by her proposed to belief as divinely revealed in her common and universal teaching, in which the Vatican Council declared are to be believed with Catholic and divine faith. And so this might be what we would call secondary objects of infallibility, things that are divinely, not necessarily divinely revealed immediately, but connected to something that is divinely revealed, either by way of logic or history. Okay, but it continues. But in this likewise must be reckoned amongst the duties of Christians, that they allow themselves to be ruled and directed by the authority and leadership of bishops, and above all, the apostolic see, which is the papacy, right? Um, and how fitting it is that this should be so anyone can easily perceive, or how fitting it is that this should be so anyone can easily perceive. For the things contained in the divine oracles, that's the word of God, have reference to God in part, and in man, or in part to man, and to whatever is necessary for the attainment of his eternal salvation. So, things that are revealed by God, and when you look at the divine oracles, divine revelation, some things pertain to who God is, but also how we are to behave and what we are to give assent to. And it, of course, pertains to our eternal salvation. Now, he says, both these, that is to say, what we are bound to believe and what we are obliged to do, are laid down, as we have stated, by the church using her divine right, and in the church by the supreme pontiff. So we are to obey things that the church, we're not only to assent to the things that it teaches, but we are to obey things it obliges us to do. Now, here's kind of the money quote. Wherefore, it belongs to the Pope to judge authoritatively what things the sacred oracles contain. Now, full stop there. I fear that I don't know if it's the majority of Catholics, but at least the majority of Catholics I encounter, I fear they don't believe this, what the Pope is saying here. They think it is their duty to judge what divine revelation has revealed over and against the magisterium. And they will say things like, well, what the Pope taught over here isn't traditional. And it's like, wait, you set yourself up as the judge now of what tradition is, rather than learning from the Pope on what tradition is. Watch this. It belongs to the Pope to judge authoritatively what things the sacred oracles contain. You can judge what is traditional and what is not, but you can't judge it authoritatively. And once an authoritative judgment has been issued from the church, that overrides your private judgment. Unless we're Protestants. Now, if we're Protestants, we think that our own private interpretation overrides everything from Christ's teaching authority on earth. But if you're Catholic, you say, wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's a recipe for chaos. So it belongs to the Pope to judge authoritatively what things the sacred oracles contain, as well as what doctrines are in harmony and what in disagreement with them. Again, I fear so many of us don't believe this anymore. Because again, we think we're the ones who get to tell the church and the magisterium and its teachings what is and is not in harmony with the faith. I see it all the time, even with the most recent declaration from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. It seems like the majority of Catholics are pushing back, saying, no, this is not in harmony with the faith. Hold on, wait. It's up to the Pope to determine what is and is not in harmony with the faith. And it is your duty to submit to that unless you want to be your own Pope. But at that point, you're now repeating the same error of Martin Luther and the Protestants. It's up to the Pope to determine which doctrines are in harmony and what is in disagreement with the faith. And also, for the same reason, to show forth what things are to be accepted as right and what to be rejected as worthless. It's up to the magisterium to determine that, not us. We may make private judgments if the magisterium hasn't authoritatively ruled. But as soon as it authoritatively rules, my private interpretation and judgment gives way to the teaching authority of Jesus Christ on earth. What is necessary to do and what to avoid doing. Notice that. It's not just what we must believe and what is in harmony with the faith, but also what should be done and what shouldn't be done. Whether certain blessings can be given or not given, whether certain liturgies can be imposed on communities or not, whether certain liturgical prescriptions are in harmony with the faith and are good, and so on and so forth. It's up to the church to determine that, the magisterium, and especially the Pope, not us as individuals, certainly not in any kind of authoritative way. In order to attain eternal salvation, listen to that, as a sure guide for our eternal salvation, it is the church, the magisterium, that determines what is safe, what is not, what should be done, what should not be done, what is true, what is false, what is in harmony with the faith, what is not, what will secure my salvation, what won't. It's up to the magisterium to determine that. Again, if we're Catholics, we have to accept that. Now, if we're going to be Protestants and make ourselves our own pope, then we can say, you know what, I don't accept that. But let's at least be honest with ourselves and with other people and say, hey, you know what? I'm not really Catholic. I don't believe this Catholic stuff about the magisterium. I want to be my own pope. And so I'm going to go start my own community or join one that has already been started by somebody else. Notice this last part here. This is probably the kicker. For otherwise, like if these things weren't true, if this weren't the case, otherwise, there would be no sure interpreter of the commands of God, nor would there be any safe guide showing man the way he should live. Notice the language there. It is the magisterium that is the sure interpreter of divine revelation. It is the magisterium that is the safe guide, not me. So I don't get to sit in judgment of the magisterium and say, this document isn't in harmony with the faith. No, we have our roles reversed here. When the church teaches authoritatively, it's now learning time for us. It's no longer teaching time, it's learning time. And if we think that we can teach the teacher, we're in the wrong faith. It is Christ's teaching authority that teaches us, the magisterium, and we are the students, and we are to accept it with docility because it is the sure interpreter and the safe guide, not me and not you. Pride says, I won't listen. Pride says, I will not serve. Pride says, I will rebel. Pride says, I will not follow. I will go my way. That's the same mistake that Satan made. So when we do this, when we fight against the magisterium, what are we doing? We're following in the footsteps of Satan. And we're doing the work of Satan, whether we realize it or not. Because we say, I will not serve. I will not listen. I will not assent. Now, I want to remind you, again, Humani Generis, if you recall from previous shows, the magisterium, even when it's teaching non-infallibly, is the voice of Christ on earth. Pope Pius X says of things that are non-infallible, such as things that are just taught in encyclicals that are not ex cathedra, these matters are taught with the ordinary teaching authority, of which it is true to say, he who heareth you heareth me. That's Jesus. Jesus said to his apostles, he who heareth you heareth me. And those who don't hear you do not hear me and him who sent me. And the Pope applied that to non-infallible teachings of the papacy, of the Pope. So in other words, it's the voice of Christ who speaks to you in the teaching authority when the church speaks, even when it teaches non-infallibly. And if you want to say, no, I think it's wrong, I think that's inconsistent with the faith, well, guess what? You're now sitting in judgment of the voice of Christ on earth. Can you really still say that you're Catholic and you're following the teaching authority that Christ established at that point? And are you not at that point setting yourself up as you being the safe guide, you being the sure interpreter of the commands of God and not the magisterium? And see, this also backs up what I've been noting here, the traditional Catholic doctrine of a charism of safety. It is the church's teachings that are a safe guide. The church can't teach heresy even when it teaches non-infallibly. It will not teach anything that would be destructive to your souls. Because if it did, it would no longer be a safe guide. It would rather be a destructive guide, a blind guide, a harmful guide, right? It's a safe guide because even when it teaches non infallibly, it's teaching with a safety because of a charism of the Holy Spirit. That's why Joachim Salaveri, repeats Franzelin and Cardinal Bio, among others, who note, we think that judgments of this kind, also outside of a definition ex cathedra, can be considered in such a way that they demand obedience, which includes the submission of the mind. Not indeed that the doctrine be believed infallibly to be true or false, but that it is judged that the doctrine contained in such a judgment is safe. And for us, not indeed from a motive of divine faith, but from a motive of sacred authority, whose undoubted function is to provide for the purity and security of doctrine that is to be embraced with the submission of mind and by rejecting the contrary. So here you see these theologians reiterating this notion of a charism of safety, even when the church teaches infallibly. Its doctrine is safe, even if the doctrine is not infallibly true. It's at the very least safe. It will not be destructive to your soul. And this is not an opinion of theologians. It's right here taught by the magisterium itself. The magisterium is this safe guide, even when it's speaking non-infallibly. That's binding on your conscience. This is not up for discussion. This is an authoritative judgment. And you can even see that from Pius XII, who notes that once these things have been spoken of by the Pope and taught authoritatively, even if not infallibly, they're no longer open for debate, which is why he says, it is obvious that that matter, according to the mind and will of the popes, cannot be any longer considered a question open to discussion among theologians. So it's not a debate that is open for theologians on whether or not the magisterium is theologically safe in its judgments and teachings when it teaches non-infallibly. That is not open for discussion. It is already a settled matter. It is a safe guide according to Leo the 13th in his magisterium. It's not open for discussion. This is one of those things that we are to submit to. Why? Because it is the sure interpreter of the commands, not us. So, I also want to read one other thing to you from Pope Pius X, the Hammer of Heretics. He says this. Let me zoom in just a little bit more for you so you can see it a little bit larger. Okay. Therefore, when we love the Pope, there are no discussions regarding what he orders or demands, or up to what point obedience must go. You ever heard that before? Hey, is this infallible? And people will ask that because they want to know, hey, do I really have to accept this thing? Hey, is this taught in this form? Is this taught in this kind of way? Because they're again trying to find out, well, how far can I dissent from this? If we love the Pope, there are no discussions regarding what he orders or demands, or up to what point obedience must go. Some people say, oh, that means you have to turn your brain off as a Catholic. No, but you do have to turn your pride off. And in what things he is to be obeyed? When we love the Pope, we do not say that he has not spoken clearly enough. You heard that one before, right? Oh, the Pope is not clear enough. He doesn't speak clearly. When we love the Pope, we don't say such things. But if we have an agenda, we have anger and hatred towards the Pope, and we have dissent in our heart against his papacy and his magisterium, then we might say such things. Almost as if he were forced to repeat to the ear of each one the will clearly expressed so many times, not only in person, but with letters and other public documents. I love that. We do not place his orders in doubt, adding the facile pretext of those unwilling to obey, that it is not the Pope who commands, but those who surround him. We've heard this one before, right? Oh, the Pope didn't actually teach that. That was just kind of more something that the prefect said, and we try to get around it. and say, it's not magisterial. We do not limit the field in which he might and must exercise his authority. One does not oppose. One does not oppose to the Pope's authority that of others, however learned they may be, who differ from him. So, you might find somebody who's a really well-known cardinal or bishop out there, and sometimes people will bring these into the forefront and present them as somehow um, a figure to oppose the papacy. And we're going to back this cardinal. I've heard people say, I'm going to stick to Cardinal so-and-so. I'm going to stick to Bishop so-and-so. But it's funny, what you won't hear them say is, I'm going to stick to Christ's teaching authority on earth. Oh, you won't hear that. You won't hear them say, I'm going to stick to the magisterium. Instead, they say, I'm going to stick to this cardinal or bishop. Well, you'll note historically, that's exactly what schismatics do. They stick to one bishop or cardinal or group of bishops or cardinals instead of the magisterium, instead of the teaching authority of Christ on earth. Sometimes they do it out of ignorance. They might actually think that this cardinal is a member of the magisterium and teaches with magisterial authority when he doesn't. Same with the bishop. I've explained, you have on the universal level, the one who speaks universally is going to be either the Pope or an ecumenical council. Now on a local level, who teaches locally in a particular territory, that's going to be a bishop with a diocese. Not a bishop without a diocese, but a bishop with a diocese. Not a cardinal without a diocese, a bishop with a diocese. A cardinal without a diocese doesn't have any magisterial authority. A bishop without a diocese doesn't have any magisterial authority. A bishop with a diocese has magisterial authority in his local territory for those people there. And that's it. Not for anyone outside of that territory either. But on the universal level, it is the Pope. He can teach the whole church universally. For however great their learning, they must be lacking in holiness. Listen to this. For however great their learning, some of these cardinals, some of these bishops, some of these theologians that we like to run to and use them over and against the magisterium, some of those bishops and cardinals might have great learning. But he says they're lacking in holiness. For there can be no holiness in dissension from the Pope. Oh, whoa, whoa. Pope Pius X is very clearly saying, you might appeal to this cardinal, you might appeal to that bishop because of their great learning, but really, you think that, there's holiness and sanctity in that, and in fact, you even think that these figures are holy, if they are dissenting from the magisterium of Jesus Christ on earth, if they are dissenting from what it teaches, there is no holiness there. That can be a shocker, because some of these people we hold in high esteem, and we say they're such a holy person. Well, Pope Pius X says they're not holy if they dissent from the magisterium publicly. I think we really need to take this to heart, because I think many of us have embraced a non-Catholic understanding of the magisterium. We think that we get to sit in judgment of it, and thus we've made ourselves our own pope, just like the Protestants have done. Rather, we need to retrace our steps, put our pride to the side, and say, you know what, even if I don't understand this, I'm going to submit myself to the teaching authority of Jesus Christ on earth, because I am not the one who teaches with his authority. I am not the voice of Christ on earth. And I don't have the same charisms that the magisterium has. And I'm certainly not a sure interpreter of the commands of God, nor am I a safe guide. I want to just conclude with this. As I've been defending the magisterium lately and what it teaches, I'll get from people, Michael, you're wrong. It's teaching heresy. It teaches this. It teaches that. Michael, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. Listen, it's not me you disagree with. It is the magisterium you disagree with. And I think you need to be honest with yourself and others about that. This is not about disagreeing or agreeing with me or somebody else, like a cardinal or a bishop. It's not what it is. This is a disagreement in many cases with the magisterium itself. And I think at the very least, if we're not willing to put our pride to the side and assent to what the magisterium teaches, at least let's be honest about that. And let's not say that, oh, I just disagree with this YouTuber. I disagree with this theologian. Or I disagree with this bishop. No, it's a disagreement with Christ's teaching authority that you have. And that's a deeper problem. But a lot of people don't want to put it in those terms, because as soon as you put it in those terms, all of a sudden, wait, I'm now in disagreement with Christ's teaching authority. Obviously, there's a massive problem now. So instead, we try to redefine terms and use euphemisms, and we express the situation differently. Oh, I just don't agree with this person's opinion and interpretation. Yeah, it's not that. It's that we're fighting against Christ's teaching authority in many instances. And I think that we need to recognize that. Anyways, I'm going to have a lot more content coming out pretty soon on the issue of public dissent with the church, which the church never allowed for and does not allow for, even to this day. But has become very popular ever since the dissenters of Humanae Vitae popularized the issue or the phenomenon of public dissent. And unfortunately, some people who even accept Humanae Vitae and are perhaps on the other end of the spectrum on that particular question, they're all in favor of the document rather than dissenters of it. Unfortunately, they've bought into the same notion of the dissenters of Humanae Vitae in their adoption of public dissent against Christ's teaching authority on earth. And so I'm going to have more videos addressing that. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful. If it was, please let me know. Put that in the comment section. Let me know that this was content that you found valuable. If so, I'll continue to produce more stuff like this. So just let me know there. And yeah, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Help me grow this channel. Especially, I'm trying to reach a goal of hitting 70K before 2024. So we got a day and a half left here. Help me reach that goal. Let's see, we're at right now 69,951. So we need 49 more subs and we'll reach that goal. Hey, help me grow Reason and Theology so that I can reach more people. The more people subscribe, the more YouTube will share this content with other people. And so if you found this helpful and productive, please help me do that. And also check me out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology, if you want to support the show financially and also get access to plenty of extra content behind the scenes and patron exclusive content and early access stuff like that. All right. See y'all later. God bless. Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy, and engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy today.